Australian government initiative, Avpn, a Pan-Asian network for social investing, and also our partner for today's event, AusCham. So I am Mary Tarnufka, and I'm the Executive Director of AmCham Vietnam, which is headquartered here in Ho Chi Minh City. We have over 550 members throughout the country, the region, and the world. And our mission is to promote trade and investment between the United States and Vietnam and serve as the voice of American business here in Vietnam. And our vision is to be the most influential, strategic, and dynamic business association in Vietnam and to drive innovation and sustainable growth and help our members succeed. We are a diverse and inclusive business association, and we welcome American, Vietnamese, and international companies that share our interest in creating an enabling, fair, transparent, predictable regulatory environment here in Vietnam that values innovation. And we hope to be a community that you want to join. We are also happy to partner with our fellow business chambers in Vietnam, such as we are doing today with AusCham. We also have 18 different active committees, including a capital markets and financial services, women in leadership, and ESG committee, for whom we have, I think, representatives of all the leadership of those committees with us today, either in person or online. And we believe investing in women-led and gender-balanced businesses is not just a good thing to do, it's good business. At AmCham, we're committed to diversity and inclusion, both in our leadership and our membership. And we aim to enhance the participation of women in leadership in AmCham, their workplaces, and the broader community in Vietnam. So now I would like to introduce Allison Hollowell, who is the Chief Product Officer at Avpn, with more than a decade of experience in corporate strategy, marketing, and brand management, much of it focused on social impact. Please join.
I'm not as tall as Mary, so I need to move the mic down. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Thank you so much to Mary and AmCham for your support in organizing this event, and AusCham for helping us to promote this event, as well as, of course, to the Australian government and to Investing in Women for supporting this important topic, actually throughout the region. So Avpn is running a series on this topic that's happening all throughout Southeast Asia, and this is the Vietnam component of that. And it's a two-part series, and we'll talk more about the second event at the end of this. But we're really excited to be here and hosting this today. So as Mary said, I am the Chief Product Officer for Avpn. Technically, I'm based in Singapore, but I happen to live here in Vietnam, which has been quite helpful during COVID to have a presence here locally. So it's wonderful to be able to do this in person. It is my first event that I've done in person in a long time, and I'm feeling like, wow, there's a lot of people in the room, and it's exciting to be back kind of up on a stage and talking with you all. So thank you for spending your afternoon with us. I wanted to first give a little bit of an update on what Avpn is, because I think many in the room don't really know us. So we are a network for social investors across Asia. And the reason that we exist is we all know the challenges that we see in terms of the social and environmental issues in the world, and particularly here in Asia, where it is magnified. And we know that there is a massive gap from a financing perspective in order to reach the SDGs. But at the same time, this part of the world, there is a massive amount of wealth that's being created locally. And with that is coming a new focus of people thinking about how to solve these problems in their own backyard, organizations and people. And so Avpn really comes in to help create that enabling environment, to think about how we can maximize people's impact, and think about the entire, what we call continuum of capital. And so I'll, jump ahead to that. So Avpn focuses on this full, what we call continuum of capital. And it's everything from philanthropy to impact investing to sustainable finance. And it's across a whole range of impact and financial returns. And we see that there is there is no group that can do this alone. Everyone needs to be kind of working in Congress with one another around achieving the impact goals that we have, and whether that be them investing in debt, equity, grants, or also the non-financial side around human and intellectual capital. So this is our domain that we work in, and our role is to really help make the whole ecosystem function better. We have people throughout the whole region. We have 600 members across the region, and we have team members in 12 markets on the ground. So I'm very happy to introduce today Christina Aman, who is our new advisor for Avpn here in Vietnam, that's just joined us recently. So hopefully you'll all get a chance to connect with Christina here at the event today. And finally, today, we're thrilled to be talking more about the financial side of the spectrum and private equity and venture capital and the role that plays in gender equality in the region, and specifically here in Vietnam. It's an incredibly important topic, and we have members from across this whole spectrum that are interested in gender and who are using different lenses to think about how their impact how their capital, is being used towards impact, and specifically towards empowering women entrepreneurs and women consumers. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to a lively discussion.
So it is now my honor to introduce Australian Consul General Julianne Cowley. Julianne is a senior career officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and was most recently Assistant Secretary, Health Policy Branch. She has been Consul General here in Ho Chi Minh City for a little over 2 years. And throughout her career, she has led policy areas in health, human resources, and international development assistance. And in her time as Consul General, she has worked to strengthen Australian Vietnamese economic, education, and cultural ties, with a particular effort on promoting innovation, gender equality, and empowerment of women and girls in Vietnam. Let's welcome her.
Well, thank you very much for that kind welcome. Allison, Hollowell, Christina Amlin from the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, the executive directors of AmCham and AusCham, Mary and Simon, Kyle, the country director of IFC, business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here this afternoon for what is set to be a fascinating conversation. First of all, I echo Allison's comments about being able to gather here. I think it is worthwhile acknowledging Vietnam's success, and that is why we can come together, where we are very conscious that in so many places around the world we wouldn't be able to do this. So I think that is an important setting, but it also leads into the point about why the topic of conversation is important, because when we think about what COVID has done and what it has done to economies around the world, I think we need to talk about building these economies back, but building them back better. And I really like this idea and thinking about this. It is a challenge to us. It's a challenge to the private sector. There is a role, and there is a different role in building back a world that has greater emphasis on gender equality and that is a more equitable world. And I think that is very much the underlying focus of this conversation here today. The Australian government is, of course, very passionate about this, and thank you, Mary, for acknowledging that. And I think, again, as we've just heard in the opening remarks, this isn't because it's a nice thing to do or the right thing to do. There is actually a business reason, and the ask today for investors, for people who are interested in engaging in gender lens investing, is just to look at the numbers, just to look and make business decisions and to think about being one of those leaders. There is a huge opportunity here. We know that it is an underfunded area, women's led business, and the business case is incredibly clear. One of the statistics that I wanted to just say briefly, particularly, and this is a quote, whenever I have said this quote, it's actually stopped people in their tracks, so particularly when I'm talking to counterparts in the Vietnamese government. And it is a helpful report that McKinsey put out in 2018, so a couple of years old, but very respected institution and name. It is a piece of research that is specific to Vietnam. So I think, again, very useful and relevant for us to reflect on. And the McKinsey report said, if we improve women's economic empowerment in Vietnam, we can add 40 billion a year to Vietnam's GDP by 2025 annually. Every year, $40 billion more will be unlocked. And I'm not talking about VND, this is USD. That is sizable and it should not be ignored. This is the opportunity that presents itself. And I think this is where this has to be a business discussion, and it just makes business sense. It has to be a business discussion that is urgent, that is happening now, because of course, post-COVID, what are we concentrating on? We're concentrating on building back economies. And here is the answer. We unlock the potential of women and we engage women in all areas of our economy. It cannot be that hard. It is 2021, it is beyond time. So for all those reasons and many more, and I'm very interested to hear and want to turn to the panel today, but I thank you very much for giving your time. I thank you for engaging and being those early leaders on this issue. The Australian government investing in women, we have put $100 million into investing in women. It is our flagship event, a flagship program in gender equality across 4 countries. So we as a government, very proud of this, very active. We want to partner with these countries, particularly in the region. We acknowledge and see the scope of the potential, and we're very excited that the private sector and investment will walk with us in doing that as well. So thank you very much for being here, and look forward to the conversations.
So now it is my pleasure to introduce IFC, International Finance Corporation. I think East Asia and Pacific lead for gender and economic inclusion, Amy Lundstra, who will share with us some of the key findings of IFC's recent report, Moving Toward Gender Balance in Private Equity and Venture Capital.
Thank you so much to Avpn, Investing in Women, AusCham, and AmCham for inviting me today. I have to, of course, apologize for Kyle Kellhofer, who is not with me, as you may have noticed. We were planning to demonstrate gender balance by presenting together, but he has injured himself, vacation sports injury requiring medical treatment, but not life-threatening. So he's had to return to Hanoi. Apologies on his behalf. But I'm going to talk a bit about some research that IFC has done. I think most of you in the room probably are familiar with the International Finance Corporation. We're part of the World Bank Group. I think we have some clients in the room, so we don't have to get into deep discussion about what it is we do. But for those of you less familiar, we do debt and equity finance in emerging markets, of course, and we also provide advisory services, and we do research on issues that we think are important to private sector development in emerging markets, like the research I will share with you today. Because we are part of the World Bank Group, we of course share the mission, which is to eliminate absolute poverty and boost shared prosperity. Like, this is something we know cannot happen without more gender equal opportunities. So I will just talk to you a bit about research we did in 2019. So as Julianne mentioned, of course, this is pre-COVID, but it doesn't make the urgency or the findings any less relevant. We looked at private equity and venture capital in emerging markets. And we did 4 types of analysis, or 4 channels of analysis with this. First, the quantitative analysis was done by constructing a very large data set. We looked at gender data and performance data from hundreds of firms. Thousands of firms we received gender data from, and about 700 firms we also received performance data. We looked at the fund level and we looked at the portfolio company level. And we were looking, of course, at gender balance but also at performance. We took that analysis, that quantitative analysis, and we sense checked it then with experts in the field. So we talked to about 50 professionals, LPs, GPs, and gender experts to try to understand what are the causes of the underrepresentation of women, what are some potential solutions, how do you think this relates to the business case? And we came up with hypotheses out of that. From there, we surveyed investment professionals about these qualitative findings around why and how and what was going on. And with that, we started to understand more about the reasons for imbalance, but also the reasons for a business case to emerge, which of course we did find in the data. And finally, and throughout, we were guided by an advisory panel, both practitioners and academics. So here's the results. First of all, in terms of women as allocators of capital, there are not so many. So allocators of capital in our definition means senior investment decision makers. So if you're in human resources, if you're in legal, if you're in operations, you're not included in this analysis. We're looking at decision makers about investments within private equity and venture capital firms. About 11% of investment professionals in emerging markets are women. So that's actually slightly better than the global average, which is 10%. However, it's mostly because of China. If we take China out of the equation, only 8% of investment professionals senior investment professionals are women. You'll see we have looked at the balance across regions. We've also looked at how venture capital and private equity compares to all industries. So the light blue bars on the right-hand side of this graph are all industries, are women in senior leadership across the board. So on balance, women in private equity and venture capital are about 17 percentage points lower representation than any other industry or than other industries. So there's not so many women. What about as recipients of capital? Only about 7% of all venture capital and private equity funding goes to women-led businesses. That's also about 8% of deals, 7% of the money, 8% of the deals. There is quite a big gap in the amount of money women get versus the amount of money men get globally. However, I think quite interestingly, that doesn't apply to East Asia. So on balance globally, women, female founders and women-led businesses get about 65% of the money that goes to men from private equity and venture capital funds. But in East Asia, it's about equivalent. You see it's 9% of the deals and 9% of the money. The reasons outside of East Asia that there is this imbalance are quite interesting, actually. One is that women tend to be receiving capital at earlier stages when the amounts are smaller. They also, I think quite interestingly and quite shockingly actually, are highly likely to be replaced by men between the first round of funding and subsequent rounds of funding. So women are more likely to be replaced by men as CEO 15 times more often than men are replaced by women as CEO in subsequent funding rounds. Now, interestingly, connecting these last two findings together, we find that when there are gender balanced investment teams, they do invest quite a bit more in women-led companies, almost double. So 7% of venture capital and private equity goes to women-led firms in general, but when you have a gender balanced team, it's about 12%. Now, the actual results. So in terms of fund performance, or the business results, I should say, gender balanced funds receive excess net internal rates of return of 1.7 percentage points more than male or female dominated funds. So when we did this analysis of gender balance, we considered a firm gender balanced if it had between 30 and 70% women. So if it's over 70% women, it's not balanced anymore. If it's under 30%, it's not balanced. So we're looking at 30 to 70% when we define balance, and balance pays off. So when compared to the median net IRR of emerging market funds, which is about 8%, the performance of gender balanced funds is about 20% higher than funds that are male or female dominated. This holds true when we control for geography and size of firm and strategy. Now we can look at the portfolio company results. Here again, the analysis demonstrates a very strong business case. Here we are focusing on increases in valuation between 2 rounds of funding or exit. So this is step-up valuations. So portfolio companies with gender balanced leadership teams have a 1.64% times increase in their step-up valuations. This means that gender balanced leadership teams are correlated with approximately 25% increases in valuation versus unbalanced funds. So now our study does go on to discuss why we think that is happening and how we can make changes, which maybe we can get into more during the discussion with the panel and afterwards in the Q&A. When we had these results, we took it back to our experts and we asked, why do you think this is happening? Why is it that gender balanced firms are returning higher, are getting higher returns? And they told us many interesting things. Of course, all of these are correlations, right? They're not causation, but there are strong reasons behind this kind of correlation. Maybe it's women add a gender balanced team, adds decision-making power. Just better decisions get made by more diverse teams. The other thing we note is that they improve deal sourcing. Women might have different networks than men, and therefore you're more able to source different kinds of deals, including good ones, if you have more women in investment decision-making roles. And finally, just in general, talent management can be better. Operations can run more smoothly. Investor relations can go more smoothly. All of these things are contributing to the better fund performance that we see. So in conclusion, of course, I mean, some of you as IFC clients know that we typically will ask you about gender balance. This is, of course, because, as I said, we'll never achieve our overarching mission of eliminating poverty or building boosting shared prosperity without providing equal opportunity to men and women, but it's also because we like to make more money. So we will ask, and we're happy to discuss this further. We have released a guide in November of last year, along with CDC, on how to do gender lens investing. And we're also quite engaged in the conversation in the region and globally with our clients and the broader community of private equity and venture capital firms. Thank you.
And now I'd like to ask our panelists to come take the stage. I will announce all their names and titles, and then I will introduce our moderator and let her introduce everyone else. So our moderator is Jimin Zhang, partner with Patamar Capital. We also have Jimin Zhang, partner with Mekong Capital. Tu Ngo, general partner with Touchstone Partners. Please come on up and keep our company. And Eddie Tai, partner with 500 Startups. And I will note, Shuyin is a partner at Patamar Capital, a venture capital firm that targets risk commensurate returns for its investors while also seeking to unlock better, they'll figure out they're matching, I think now. Did it work? While also seeking to unlock better economic opportunities for Asia's low-income communities. Shuyin is responsible for Patamar's investing activities in the Mekong region and has led investments in education, fintech, employee benefits, and healthcare. and she spearheads Patamar's gender lens investing efforts, including managing one of the first gender lens investing funds in Southeast Asia, the Investing in Women Fund. Turn it over to Shuyan.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you, Avpn and other partners for coming together to host this amazing event. I think Amy set the stage brilliantly with the presentation of that report from the IFC, and I think really laid out a very clear business case and industry data, I think, which supports the topic that we're discussing today. So I really recommend actually everyone to take a look at that report. It's one of my favorites, and I cite it a lot. Now, however, we are going to actually shift gears a bit and hear specific practical examples, which are really grounded in the Vietnam context as well. And I think that's super important for making it as real and tangible as possible for our audience here today. And I think we've got some really interesting stories in store. So we're very fortunate actually to have 4 different partner level representatives from Vietnamese funds. I think, just doesn't happen every day, just FYI. And especially in this context of gender lens investing, right? So I think it's a very critical and interesting discussion that we're about to have. And what I would like to do is create a space to have a very frank and open discussion about the topic. So for those of you who know me, I certainly have been a very passionate advocate about gender lens investing for the past 5 years or so. And I really do believe that it has, I think, enhanced the way that we look at particular market opportunities, right? The potential risk factors in our investments, in our business, and I think also the way that we think about recruitment, growth, and talent development at our firm. And I have a real expert here as well to share more on that. However, as a fund manager myself, I am also very aware of the hectic investment and fundraising process, right? The many competing priorities of running a firm, as I'm sure my fellow panelists are as well. And I know sometimes with gender lens investing, there can be a bit of an elephant in the room, right? When it comes to the practicalities of actually putting it into place. And I've definitely heard some fair questions, right? About does applying a gender lens mean that I'm really limiting my investable opportunities, right? Or does it mean, or is it a nice thing to do maybe for impact investors such as Panama, but doesn't really have much applicability, for commercial investors as well? And I think I don't agree with that's the case, but it is a question that I have been asked. And I think it's good to tackle those questions head on, or else I'm not sure that we will have the change that we hope to see. And I'm very glad to be here with a set of panelists who are up to the challenge, and I will let them introduce themselves shortly. And I think, it is important to highlight that I think the other firms and funds on this stage are commercial focused investors, right? From my best understanding, you're seeking top quartile returns for your limited partners. And, while there might be a personal story or angle, ultimately this has to make great business sense as well. It's been emphasized many times by all the previous speakers. And so today, just to get into it, I'm getting there, we are really going to focus this discussion on the aha to action. So what I mean by the aha moment is really what was that point which drove you personally and perhaps also your team more broadly to realize that gender is an important factor to consider in investments, right? Not in general, but really in investments in the fund management business. And it's interesting. I've had many conversations with different fund managers on this topic. And I think while the business case is very important, the data is critically important, it's often personal experiences, one-on-one conversations, and stories that have actually spurred change in their organizations. And then the second part, and we'll get to that a bit later, is want to be very practical and specific with actions, right? So I think everyone in this room has something to walk away with when it comes to practical things that you can do to implement a gender lens approach at an investment firm. And I'll get the panelists to share different examples of that. But first, introductions and aha moments. And maybe I will start with Du. Sorry to pick on you first, but I think you have such an interesting story about being an entrepreneur first. I think many of you probably already know Du was a very successful entrepreneur, both at Yola as well as Elsa, and recently has started her own fund and is a general partner at Touchstone. So, and I think as we were preparing for this panel, you shared that your perspective has shifted a bit on this issue now that you're an investor. And I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I think the audience would as well, about that journey. And a quick introduction about yourself. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Shuyin. I thought I'm, sitting in between you and Min Yang. Min Yang should be the first person to go. Thank you for the opportunity. I think before becoming an entrepreneur, my story is actually I'm a woman. I'm a woman from Vietnam. Didn't grow up from like a very privileged background. Didn't grow up in District 2, Thao Dien. Went to a public school, but was really fortunate to meet sponsors, mentors who gave me scholarship to study overseas and open up amazing networks and opportunities for me. So that to me is always like a duh moment. Why are you not investing in talented women? Not an aha moment. And then subsequently, when I co-founded Yola, which is an education company targeting K-12 public school students in Vietnam for English and soft skills training, a lot of our customers, the key decision makers, are mothers. So we've been able to build a successful company, growing multi-million-dollar business with women. So again, it's another the moment, why not? And so interestingly, when I started Touchstone, and thank you, Shuyin, for opening up like a really, I guess, safe and frank environment, what I do realize is that, again, words on the streets, that sometimes people need to go to bars or entertain here and there to make the deal happen. And to me, coming from outside of that industry, seeing that, it's like, oh, interesting. So maybe that's kind of like soft culture that impacts the hard numbers that we're seeing.
Thank you so much, too. And you've highlighted, I think, some great points. I think for us, it was also this aha moment when we realized how many women decision makers there were at the consumer level, right? Whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's, even factory workers, right? We had some companies in that sector and like, wow, it's like 70, 80% women. And I think that really helped us look at our investments in a different way. So thank you for really highlighting that issue. Maybe moving on to Eddie, Eddie. Okay, everyone agrees. So I think, I think as we were talking, you mentioned there was a set of experiences over your, life as well as your career, which really helped, galvanize your thoughts on this issue. So it would be great to hear about that.
Great. Thanks for having me on this panel. Very interesting topic that I have been learning more and more about over the last couple of years, as Shiyun knows. My journey on this, there was not a single aha moment, you're right. It is rooted very much in a series of experiences I've had as a person developing in this world. And I guess it would start with as a child, as a son of my mother and younger brother to a brilliant older sister. My mother was born and raised here in Saigon, and she has had a remarkable business career. She's retired now, but her career has spanned from import-export to tourism to accounting to real estate. She's just such a dynamic woman, and so that was the very first example for me of brilliance, irrespective of gender. My sister as well. She's definitely the better investment decision maker and financial planner between her and her husband. I'll spare the details here because I realize we're on the record, but these examples show me that like they kind of reinforce this concept of there's talent everywhere. And so then the second data point I would share out of the three quick ones is in college I studied government and economics. And economics, the very first thing you learn about is supply and demand. And when I start to apply this in different areas, including in investing, you start to see very obvious moments, like dumb moments, not aha moments, but like in the context of capital allocation between genders. I mean, if talent is evenly distributed and all the money is going to one gender and very little money is going to the other gender, then why don't I go there? There's going to be plenty of opportunity and less competition for it. So it's almost like an arbitrage opportunity, not a extractive one, but just an opportunity to invest. So that's the second kind of moment. And then the third was similar to Tu, as I came into the venture space and encountered different folks in the venture space and startup community as well. Obviously, a lot of men, and we would be in these different professional or social settings where people would come in, hey, bro, how's it going? And so on. And I'm a guy, but I don't really identify as a bro. And so that was a little off-putting. And then I could imagine just like one step farther, what if I weren't even a guy? How tough would it be to be rolling into this kind of situation? What kind of connections would people get turned off from, not have access to because of this? So as we started doing work with 500 Vietnam, which is, sorry, I forgot that introduction. It's an early stage venture fund. It's part of the global 500 startups family of funds headquartered in San Francisco. The Vietnam Fund has been investing here over the last 4 years, 75 companies in our portfolio now. As we started investing out of this fund, these all came together and said, hey, like, what do we do to make sure that we are going to maximize returns? And so that leads, I guess, to the later part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eddie. Last but not least, my pleasure to introduce Jimin Zhang from Mekong Capital. And so I think, yeah, as you mentioned to me, I mean, your role is a bit different from ours. Your focus is really as the partner of talent and culture at Mekong, from what I understand. And you probably have been, I think, more sensitive and aware and engaged with this issue, probably perhaps earlier than the rest of us. So it'll be really interesting to hear, I think, your own personal journey, but then also maybe some of the journey at Mekong as well, right? And how I think you had a very interesting story about how, you know, there was different, both kind of top down and bottom up kind of aspects of really driving some of this change around gender at Mekong Capital. And we'd love to hear about that.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I am an authentic or original Vietnamese woman. I was born and grew up and studied all in Vietnam. And 11 years ago, I joined Mekong Capital as a junior role, and I didn't know what is the gender balance, but I knew that like every year, I always receive one report that every year, by end of each year, I need to submit the data to IFC, Amy. The report here was very detailed about like how many is a woman working at Mekong Capital, how many is women that working at our invested company, and it was very specific in the way that how many coaching program or workshop that you organize for the women employees at our invested company. I said, oh my God, they care too much about like a woman. Yeah, and that was my first time experience that, oh, I am the woman and I was taking care. Since that like the ways that I was born and I grew up, my father was the person who asked me to join which university. And then when I got married, the first my 3 years, I chose to stand behind him. Since that I thought that that was my father told me. And then I joined Mekong Capital. I experienced the power of the woman. So at Mekong Capital now, we don't have a gender balance. We have 80% of the women and only 20% men. But the thing here is that like when you invited me to the session, gender lens investing, and I just researched and said, wow, that is really amazing. And that is something that like exactly, that's like something exactly what we have done so far at Mekong. We do believe in women from the data. Yeah, first from the data show that like the woman employees always has a long-term commitment at Mekong Capital and they're always successful. And even like now we have the 4 partners at Mekong Capital, but we have 2 partners as a woman, Vietnamese women. So again, thank you so much. And I'm really proud of being here as the original authentic Vietnamese woman. Thank you.
I think we're balanced in that regard. I think we have 2 authentic Vietnamese women on the panel and 2 others. But no gender. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not sure. We can slice this and dice this panel in many ways. Great. Well, thank you so much, I think, for opening up and I think sharing some of your, I think, personal motivations, which I think are super important for this discussion, because I think often we hear all the, all the data and these big numbers about investing in women, but it is a very personal thing too, I accept. Now we want to get very practical, right? So all of you have, in different ways, implemented different strategies, practices in your funds, right? In your work, which which pay attention to a gender lens, essentially, right? And I think we all know that there's many ways to do this. It can be in your pipeline development efforts. It can be in the way you conduct your due diligence process. It can be even in your positioning as you go out fundraising, right? Some LPs like the IFC love to know about gender, right? And it can be in your portfolio management, or you could look at internally and see, how are you building your own firm, right? What percentage of women are there? Do you have inclusive practices within your own firm itself? So there's many areas to apply a gender lens. I think it's quite endless, and maybe sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming. So I think we want to start today with some very practical steps that I think each of you are taken or in the process of implementing, definitely recognizing it's a journey. I don't think any one of us has really perfected this yet. But I'd love to make it, if you could share kind of very practical steps. I will keep a list and we can send it out to the attendees afterwards, with the idea of just getting people inspired, right? And making, I think, gender lens investing seem achievable and practical, not very theoretical and like, where do we begin, right? Which was, I think, how I felt a little bit, to be honest, when I first heard about the concept. So let's mix it up a little bit. Maybe Jimin Zhang, would you like to start?
Okay. So if you have an opportunity to look at our history, our investment history, so you may see that we have two successful investment. One is a P&J, led by Madame Zhang. And she's an entrepreneur woman, and also Madame Thong. So she's a CEO. She's used to be the CEO and founder of Draftfaco. And in my experience, in my working experience, when I had the opportunity to work directly with both of them, I always experienced that they are how can I say, as a Vietnamese woman, think as a man, but when they take action as a woman, things really like a sharp, very strategy. But when she acts like a Madame Zhang, when she acts or like a communicate, it's really womanly. And 6 months ago, when I had a conversation with Madame Zhang, and I asked her, how about your business? Because I know the COVID-19 made the impact, hit P&J. She smiled and she looked at me and she shared with me, do you know, as a Vietnamese woman, we have never spent, if we earn 10 dong, we only spend around 4 dong and then save at least 2 or 3 dong for the situation like COVID-19. And I shocked. I said, oh, wow. And she said that, so that's why that, it doesn't matter like COVID-19 or not, but we easily overcome this situation. And she totally demonstrates an example of a thing as a man, but when asked as a woman. And she's come from my central, from my home, my hometown, Quảng Ngãi as well. And so that is the example for me, as the proud of the Vietnamese woman. And the other thing that for internally, so at Mekong Capital, I know even we had 80% of the women in Mekong Capital. But it starts from the organizational, organizational level as a commitment as organizational level. So we committed each individual personal purpose will be fulfilled at Mekong Capital. And then that when we ask the people to share about their dreams, the personal commitment, and we found out the common theme here is that a lot of women in at Mekong Capital, they do care about the woman empowerment leadership. And one of them just stood up and she come from the send email and come from directly with the ManCom management team member, ManCom. And then she said that we need to have the woman empowerment leadership group at Mekong Capital, and I am a leader. I said, wow, that's great. Just do it. So it's come from, yes, it starts from the commitment as organizational level. However, like we gave them the freedom, the choice to to fulfill their personal dream here. And then that now why I'm sitting here to share with you, and at Mekong Capital, they are making the video clip, yeah, to share and to inspire the other people about how to live the freedom, power, full self-expression as a Vietnamese woman. And we don't do anything as a leader. We don't do anything. It's all come from their personal choice. It's all come from their personal dream, personal commitment. So that's what we call it, called creation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I do have one follow-up question for you, because I think you mentioned something very interesting, I think when you were looking at your recruitment process, right? And I think you were doing some analysis of the different male and female candidates who had applied to Mekong. And well, anyway, I don't want to spoil your story. So please, I mean, it'll be great if you could share, I think, some of the insights that you had from analyzing that data.
So again, so we start with the data analysis, and we start with we start to see the pattern of the employees who can have a long-term commitment at Mekong Capital. And I think it may start from our nature of work, because most of so you can see that Mekong Capital is quite different comparing with the other funds, that we work very closely with the investing company, with the CEO and the founder. And sometimes that, not sometimes, but most of the time, we need the person who patient enough. I don't mean that the man not patient, I'm so sorry, but just, but we mean that it's come from the nature of work. So as a person who a patient, who flexible enough, to reinvent themselves, to have a direct conversation, but still think as a man. And when we conduct the data and analysis, and we found out that we found out the pattern that all of the successful employee as Mekong Capital so far is all women, and especially working mom. And then it showed the data, and then that we decided, okay, so we still recruiting men, so please apply the CV to us. However, we still prefer hiring the working mom, the Vietnamese working mom, the woman, since that we have a data to show that they can have a work long term here, and they can be more flexible, can be more can be more successful as the role as an investment associate.
Got it. Interesting. So I took away, I think there's, well, a few, I think really practical steps that I think Mekong has taken. I think one was bringing this women's empowerment leadership group, but it was, and that was really, I think, capturing the enthusiasm and passion of your team, right? Because it wasn't you who came up with the idea, it was one of your team members who said, we're going to do this. So harnessing that already, the interest at different levels of the organization. I think in your recruitment process, I think you purposely looked at maybe some different traits, right, which people might not always think of when they think of an investment professional, like patience and patience and flexibility. I totally agree. There's a lot of that required. But I think identifying these as strengths, and as you say, actually getting, looking at the data and seeing what it showed you. So I think that was, super interesting. We might come back. But for now, I think I will move to, Du, who has the microphone. And yeah, maybe you could, you're obviously just beginning the journey at Touchstone. Very fast journey, by the way, and made great progress in a very short time. But maybe you can share, I think, both personally as well as at Touchstone, some of the things that you've been doing.
Yeah, I have to say it's very hard to come up with something really practical and short term, because I really think it's about shaping culture and relooking the models of what kind of GP teams, what kind of investment teams that we having. And thank you for the IFC report that basically show the more gender balanced investment team can make better investment decisions. I've been fortunate enough to partner with supportive men. And yes, on one hand, we can say, hey, let's create more space for women. But on the other hand, I actually have to say, 40% of the men attendance here. I was counting, you basically role modeling to the rest of the world how to partner with strong women. And that's very needed. So again, it's not something that's, an action, a to-do item, but I think mindset-wise, I think that's what we need. In terms of making investment decision, I mean, at Touchstone, my partner, who's a very supportive man, we usually try our best to come up with first principle thinking rather than trying to, hey, is that matching with any founder's profile that we have seen? And we've done extensive reference check with that, knowing that we have our bias. But again, in terms of recruiting our teams or doing reference check, diversity is a crucial factor that we consider. In terms of, I guess, just business culture wise, speaking of, I was having this chat with our team who in, Nam, who's standing there, in the man in blue. He was saying how, as a father, it's not easy to just say, hey, I'm gonna stay at home and support my wife who's having a baby. The women have maternal leave. What about the fathers? What about the disruption for them when they cannot connect with their children? I think business-wise, we haven't really had a lot of good practical tips on how to implement this for the men, which require them to continue working, which requires a woman to stay at home. So that's the cycle. And then on a personal level, I think this thing goes really early on, right? Like I've been personally supporting young women to pursue education opportunities, especially in science. And the more we can do that, and again, in the long run, we'll see more talents being nourished.
Thank you, too. And you raised so many great points as well. And, I'm glad that you brought up, I think that the first point you raised was around, supportive men, right? And I totally agree. That's been an important part of my journey as well. And I think role modeling how to partner with strong women is something that I'm grateful that my, business partners at Padamar and, the Beacon Fund have done. I love what you also said about, first principles thinking. I think VC is often associated with pattern recognition. I think that obviously plays into our biases. So I think really going back to first principles thinking when evaluating, deals, talent, I think it's actually one of our values as well. So, so that really resonated. And yeah, parental leave policy, both for fathers as well as mothers, I think, so critical. And I think something we've also put in place, recently, and trying to be more equitable with that as well. Beautiful. So Eddie, would love to hear from you as well, and some of the practical things that you've done.
Great. I guess I should start with one more aha moment, which was the real kickoff for our gender lens work with our investing activity, which was after our first year of investing. We invest about 18 to 20 companies a year, and something that any fund manager will do from time to time is like look at the recent investments and slice and dice the data, see what we're investing in, see how they're performing. And with our first tranche of investments, our first 18 investments, I found that only one of the 18 companies had a female founder. And that was like, Eddie, what the heck? And this one company that had a female founder was one of our better performing companies. So really it's like, okay, what's going on? To short circuit it, we didn't actually spend a lot of time diagnosing it, but we're like, okay, let's take positive steps to make sure that this changes going forward. So the very first thing we did was to tag deal leads that come into the top of the funnel. Sorry, I'll talk about talk about process stuff that we've done, and then I'll talk about the team stuff after that. So in terms of process, at the top of the funnel, tagging any deal opportunities that come to us as having a female founder or not. Very, very small and easy step, but then we could start to say, okay, let's not write this off right away. Let's not let any various subconscious biases say that this is not something worth spending time on. Or if we've decided that, okay, this is starting to look less like an opportunity, let's take a moment. Let's say, are we just writing off this space because we don't understand it or something like that? Right? So that we believe had an impact. We also did positive sourcing efforts towards areas that might yield more women-led opportunities. So for example, obviously going to women entrepreneur events and things like that. In fact, that ultimately yielded specifically one or two deals that we did going to women entrepreneur events over the last few years. And then indirectly through the networks we built up or strengthened, yielded leads, referrals that way as well. Those are, I would say, the main things that we do in terms of the investment process so far. And there's a lot more that can be done in terms of analyzing impact of gender on supply chains, on employees, and all kinds of things like that. But we felt like it was a decent start. And over time, our ratios did improve. We're now at something like 23% of our portfolio has a woman founder, which is still sounds low, but it's quite high for tech, early stage tech investment in this space. Depending on what data you believe, it's between 3-4% on the low end up to 12-13%. So we're happy that we're doing better than the industry. We hope to continue to improve that over time. I think over the long run, where we're really going to engender lasting change, and that word was selected purposely, but is things at the firm level around staffing and so on. So from very early on, although we've been mindful of gender on hiring. Our first official hire was a woman. We had up until recently been 50-50 on men and women. We're now slightly above 50% in terms of women staffing. The head of our investment team is a woman. The head of our portfolio support team is a woman. Our very first hire, our very first promotion to partner is a woman. So we've been quite proud of the great women we've been able to hire and to have development trajectories in our firm. We've also been taking steps to ensure that they stay. So I keep an eye on compensation balance. And in fact, I think our women, among our staff, our women earn more than our men. But that's performance tied. I don't think we're just throwing more money at women because we want to. We've have a better than regulatory requirement for maternity leave and paternity leave, and so on and so forth. So I think by having this intentionality within the firm and all the positive, for the sake of time, positive externalities that come with that, I think that's really going to yield as well. Going forward, we're early in our process. It may sound like a lot, but I do know that there's a lot for us to learn and to explore here. And so we're happy that we will be partnering with Investing in Women to learn more about gender lens investing and develop an action plan around that over the next couple of years. Just to say, besides achievements in staffing and achievements in portfolio breakdown profile, that is it actually yielding results for the business? I would say on one hand, it's a little early because we're only a 4-year-old fund. So I would, but overall our fund's performing well. And then our second best performing investment is a woman-led company. Overall on the net IRR so far, I think our women-led companies are averaging lower than our men, but the volatility is a lot lower. Like we have a lot fewer write-offs among the women-led companies. And then on the fundraising side, absolutely. Like we're raising for a next fund now, and certainly when we mention some of the things that we have been doing and plan to do around gender lens investing, institutional LPs are certain ones, their ears are popping up for sure. It's like literally this was the question. I don't know if you care about gender lens investing. Oh, we're very interested in gender lens investing. So that's great. I won't name names, but a couple of folks in this room.
No, thank you, Andy, I think every fund manager's ear perks up when we hear the word fundraising. So thank you for sharing your experience on that front. And I definitely agree. I think we're getting asked the question much more as well. I think being asked to provide data, and I think, yep, it's a great exercise, I think, for us to actually go about that. So yep, and then just maybe to summarize, quick recap of your points. I think tagging your deals kind of in adding gender, I guess, to your CRM, right? And getting a much better sense of the gendered nature of your deal flow, super interesting and important. I think more active outreach at female-focused type of events. I think the hiring and development of your team, looking at kind of compensation, any potential gender pay gaps. Yeah, and I think tying it all back or trying to tie it all back to performance, right? Although I agree with you, it's perhaps a little early to say, but some, I think, clear positive signs. Maybe one thing we haven't talked about so much, where I'm sure you probably also have a lot of interesting insights to share, is on the portfolio management side, perhaps, right? How you actually, I mean, we've talked a lot about, I think, pipeline, sourcing the best deals, developing the best talent. When it comes to actually working with your portfolio companies, do you play an active role in kind of, having some of these conversations when you see, say, an all-male founding team? How do you bring it up? Is that an awkward conversation? Yeah, I'd love to hear. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so at Mekong Capital, so we have the team, we have a ESG team, environmental, social, governance team. And one of the, our due diligence process is ESG. So this person, we may coordinate with the consulting ESG. So Amy's here, yeah, she's so familiar with that. And we do a very comprehensive about the ESG due diligence. We ask, we even ask the company, the pilot company, to send us the labor contract to ensure that they comply with the law. And we even ask them how many women in your companies, and any different in terms of the allowance, everything. And so this is one of a due diligence, I mean, the must a due diligence process in the pilot process with Mekong Capital. So if you ask the pilot companies outside there, they really is frustrated with the due diligence process with Mekong Capital, because right at the beginning we conduct ESG due diligence, and then people and leadership due diligence, HR due diligence, to ensure that we identify the right partner who really care about people, who really care about diversity and inclusion. And that is first a step right at the beginning. And then that in the process of working with our investing company, so the team, the ESG team, so we had a conversation with CEO to inspire him or her to create the vision. And in the vision here is that it's also integrate with the diversity, inclusion, or sustainability, because we want to build up the company who have a long-term and sustainable development. And so every quarter, I mean that every quarter, so but we always get the report, get the data from the investing company, or any case, any accident, anything regarding to ESG, we quickly get the data and kind of report directly to our LP limited partner here. And but the thing here is that the most important thing here is that we don't in the past, so we consider this as a process. However, since the beginning of this year, we comes up with the with the idea to inspire the CEO and the founder to see the values. And that's a starting point. And now, so they don't see that okay, this is something that they need to do to report to Mekong Capital. But this is something for them to to have a sustainable development, long-term success, and also they can fulfill beyond the number, beyond the financial. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's a really important point, right? Because I think with a lot of these things, it's inspiring the founders and entrepreneurs to see the real value, right? Like, why are you asking these questions? Or else they might feel like the first day at Mekong Capital when you got the IFC questionnaire, right? You're like, oh my God, right? So, so I think we don't want the founders obviously to feel that way. Maybe you could share a little bit, like, so how do you inspire them and get them excited about 50-page ESG questionnaire?
To be honest, like, we cannot inspire anyone else if he or she doesn't see it as a necessary and like as their dream or their commitment. And we are so lucky and like in identifying the right partner to work with. Like Tu here is also one of our partner, our like investing company partner. So we conducted the like due diligence process, and then that like we really we have the conversation. It's all it start from the conversation. And to be honest, if like the founder or the CEO, they just don't want to hire the woman, or they just don't care about sustainability, sorry, this is not fit with Mekong Capital.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
thank you. Wonderful.
So,
yeah.
It's just a really black and white, because at Mekong Capital and in our investment philosophy, we do believe behind the number is the people and the culture. And the people here is the woman, LGBT, anyone, as a human being. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's a philosophy we would all share. Maybe before you kick off, I think we'll turn to Q&A from the audience in a few minutes. So I think everyone now would be the time to start thinking about some questions. But I think please go ahead, and then we'll go to questions after that, just giving people a heads up.
So I'm gonna switch my hat to the founder entrepreneur now, having been invested by both 500 to Elsa, one of the companies I started, and Mekong. To be really honest, for founders with a lot of challenges and busy things to handle, seeing an ESG questionnaire was not always fun. However, having been through the process, when Mekong came in, we were in our year 6 of Yola, and later on in our year 7, 8, 9, something happened that, oh, okay, it makes sense that we have this here. So again, I think 500 has done some of this work, but I've been wondering for early stage startups, what kind of framework or standards that we could work with them, knowing that they have very little resources and knowing that they changing every day. If any of you have great ideas on that, I think we'd love to talk with you.
Eddie, do you want to continue on that point? And then
Sure.
yeah.
I mean, that's, I think in the VC industry, there's a lot of learning to be done still in ESG, but fortunately, there's a lot of thought leadership being put out. One report that I came across recently was by the UK CDC group. It's a fund of funds. They did a whole report on ESG and venture capital and recognizing some of the challenges you called out in terms of limited human capacity, limited financial capacity to do these things, why it's still important to look at ESG considerations, and how can an early stage firm and an early stage company still consider these. So that's one suggestion, and we're going through ourselves to think about it. Even before this point, in terms of portfolio support, Jimin Zhang suggested it as well. If a company doesn't want to do things around this, it's kind of hard. We have a principle as we continue to move forward in this journey. A set of principles. One of the principles is co-development or cooperation, not coercion. You just cannot coerce folks to do things unless they want to do it. Like they really have to want to do it. And so in some of the portfolio support we've done even with our prior fund, before we had any sort of impetus to go deeper on gender matters or ESG matters, it's really identifying the spots where there's just very clear alignment for them for something that they're already thinking about. So I have one example for that, and then also there's a serendipity about like an inception of like, well, sometimes you just have to plant the seed and let that germinate over time. On the first one, alignment. So one of our companies we invested in, solo founder, a guy, very, very smart. And you know, over the first year or so of a conversation with him, we would catch up from time to time. And one of the things he would share is, oh, our operations are developing nicely. I have this great head of ops. She's doing a great job, even though she didn't come in with a lot of experience. And I said, okay, that's great. And over time, I saw that she was quite important for the business. So I suggested to him, why don't you make her a co-founder? Why don't you give her equity? This will help make sure she stays motivated, stays with the team, especially if she sounds so, if she's so important. At first he was resistant a bit. He's like, no, I want to be solo founder, like, da, da, da. But then within a year or so, you know, I saw the title change on LinkedIn. I was like, I won't claim credit about it publicly until now, but but no, I was pleased to see that, and it just makes business sense. You want to retain your best talent, and why not consider that level of talent in all the ways, like reward that person in all the ways that they should be rewarded. So that's on the first point. On the second point, in terms of even just planting the seed, we invested in another company, 2 male co-founders. I looked at the roster after investment because we didn't look at it closely before investment. There were 10 people, all men. I was like, hey, dude, you have all men. Where's the women? And that was that. And then about a year and a half later, I mean, we're talking about other stuff, but about a year and a half later, he messaged me on Facebook, and he says, hey, bro, look, we hired women finally, like you always wanted. And he sent me a picture of his roster. Now it's like 23 people, and about 20% of them were women. So I was like, great, thanks for the update. That's really awesome. And you know, that's the, you know, we didn't align it to any specific business objective he had. But I think planting the seed there probably helped him as he was expanding his team say, okay, look, I got to be mindful of diversity. There's different considerations at play that maybe I could get away without thinking about the first 10 hires, but not after that. So I don't think it has to be as heavy a lift as a 50-page questionnaire, a GLI action plan, or anything, although more structure is not necessarily a bad thing. Even these little steps can have a positive impact over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also we're a relatively early stage investor, and I would very much echo that point. You know, I think it can't be, sometimes it feels a bit like maybe a check the box exercise if you're literally checking boxes, I guess, if you get a questionnaire, but it's not, right? And I think all of us come from the place where, you know, I think we definitely want to inspire founders to see the value, right? And I think where we start sometimes is maybe asking some like pretty simple questions in some ways, right? About what is the gender breakdown of certain aspects of that company, right? It could be, I mean, something as simple as like, you know, what percentage of your customer base are women, right? And then sometimes there's an awkward silence in the board meeting because nobody knows, right? But then the next board meeting, actually, we had this as a real example. The next board meeting, the founder, you know, came back and said like, actually, wow, I realized that, you know, 85% of my customers are women. And he actually found that to be a very powerful insight, right? Not like just because, right? But then he actually encouraged his team to really think through how some of their, you know, customer acquisition strategies, some of their retention strategies and marketing strategies could actually be important, you know, could be, you know, made more gender sensitive, right? Knowing that 85% of these customers were actually women. So that's just one example of the, you know, we've asked a very simple question, as you said, kind of planted that seed, and then it led to actually results over time, right? And I think, you know, I love also the example you gave around, I think, working actively with founders, sometimes even on the cap table, right? Or making some senior hires. So we have also engaged with some of our portfolio companies when we notice there is like, you know, there are a woman or a certain number of women, you know, who are doing great work, but they own so little equity of the company, right? Like, please fix this or else we won't invest. So sometimes it does come to that. And yes, there's a gender aspect here, but I think it's also, we just want to make sure that the people doing the work are incentivized, right? And have skin in the game and will stay here through exit. So I think there's a very clear like business rationale too, right? Even if you didn't necessarily think that was a result of a gender gap or something like that. Anyway, so I have totally exceeded my, you know, pages of like practical tips. I had to tear out a page from my notebook. So I think we can spare the panelists on that front and maybe go to the audience for questions. Before we do, I'd love to invite both Amy as well as Ali back onto the stage, who will be joining us for question time. And yep, while they come up here, yeah, I think chairs are coming. Thank you. Great. Does anyone want to kick us off with questions? I have one question over there. I'll take maybe a few questions at one time just to keep the conversation flowing. Okay. Yep, over there first. Thanks.
Hello. My name is Anne from Prime Oil, and thank you so much for organizing this event, and all your stories are so inspiring. As a woman, I'm so impressed of the company from Mekong Capital really invest a lot of program into women. In the same time, I have two concerns, so I hope you can help me to address this. Because you have a lot of program invest into women, what is the man in the company think about this? Do they think it's a sexist problem? And the second thing is that a lot of research show 30%, every 30% women are paying less than men. So why is this still an issue, and how to achieve this gap? What to do? Thank you.
Great, thank you. I might take a couple more. Wait for the mic to come around. And if you could just introduce yourself quickly, that's great. Oh, mic's there. Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Dana Dewan, and I work in development and research. And so I love data. I really think data is fantastic, but I also like to look behind the data. And so when we're thinking about gender, and when I was working in development, there was a lot of gender lens questions. But then I found that there was some issues there because there was also issues of class and issues of ethnicity. And so I'm wondering to what extent you're also taking an intersectional approach when you're looking at the data. It's not just simply female or male. There's a lot of other components. I'd be interested in how you're looking at that.
Thank you so much. I think, and maybe just one, yep, please. Just.
Hello, my name's Ha from Respect Vietnam. We study company, we study organization and people in this company and organization. So one of very interesting we're doing in CSR Sustainable is we study how leaders agree and get consensus on CSR, gender, and on business model. So my question for Ms. Zhang from Mekong Capital. What you say earlier was very inspiring. For the past 10 years, we're working on CSR about black or white. When you truly believe that most of the decision coming from gender equity would truly come from the top of the company. And that's for no doubt. And that's how define, what we call it is organizational gene or culture. My question is, during difficult times and challenge like COVID-19, so many companies has been changed and transformed in so many ways, including leadership. So it's a circumstance like that. I don't know about, I want to start more about Mekong Capital, but in general speaking, how a company can go through all the picture with the challenging and changes like that, and to be sure that top leaders truly share and agree on the priority, I don't know, number 1 or 2, on gender equity or sustainability, because that would go for the others' results. So that's my question. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So we have 4 great questions here, and I'll just pose them again quickly for the panelists, and then maybe you can volunteer to answer, although Min Zhang, you had many questions for you. So I think the first question was, with all these, like with the focus, say, on female entrepreneurs or recruiting more women, what do men think about that? Thank you. I think it's a good question to put out there. The second was, there's still a very persistent gender pay gap. What might be some of the drivers, and is there anything that we can do to make an impact there? The third is around, are we taking not just a gender lens approach, but also an intersectional approach, which takes into account class, ethnicity, and other types of difference that we might see, diversity that we might see. And then the fourth was, during challenging times, how can companies still continue to, I think, stay aligned, I think, have the, all kind of balance between competing priorities amongst the leadership teams. So I think all very fascinating questions. You don't have to answer all of them. Maybe, although we'll try and make sure at least they're answered in some way. Who would like to kick us off? Great. Thank you, Chi. Thank you, Chi.
Okay, so I will answer your question. To be honest, that like at Mekong Capital, so we we not only care about women, we care about human, not women, human, like as a whole. And yes, so like we has programs, a lot of program like for the women. I just want to share with you secrets. Like in August, we also conduct the workshop for like a sexual empowerment for women, to ensure that like they have a relationship, powerful relationship, and don't feel like scared or like not confident in that. So if you ask me that like at Mekong Capital, how about the man feeling? So I think that like right at the beginning, like I state very clearly that we not only care about the woman, but we care about the human. And in the program, we invite men like to participate with us. And we also invite their wife, their mother, their sister, attend the program with us. Because we want them to see that it's not about the Mekong Capital woman. It's about the human, and the woman, everyone, includes their mom, their wife, and their like a sister. Yeah. And again, so lucky because the men at Mekong Capital, they really engage and really participate with us. That's the one thing. And the second thing, that at Mekong Capital, we don't have like a different salary range for women or men. No, even expat and Vietnamese. To be honest, that in most of the company in Vietnam, they still have a different salary range between expat and Vietnamese. But at Mekong Capital, no, we're the same. I have the same salary with chat over. It shows that like we committed for the human being, for everyone, for the diversity, inclusion, the transparent, the fairness. Yes.
I mean, and I think, I think the first point that you raised was so important, right? And I think also your report, Amy, it doesn't say that female only like investment teams make better investment decisions or have better returns. It's gender diverse teams. And I think, that's, it's really meant to be an inclusive space. I don't think we want to go too far in the other direction. So.
No, that's right. And I was going to point out the same, that when we're looking at the research, we're looking at gender balance. And we're also trying to emphasize that that men have a lot to gain from gender equality as well. I mean, in the household, for sure, men will gain if wives are earning, closer to parity with men. And in so many other ways too. Parental leave was one of the things that we discussed, and men having more time with their own children. For sure. So it's part of the dynamic. Backlash, of course, is real, and it is something that we come up against, and that we try to be careful in the way that we address these issues for that reason too. I loved what Min Zhang was saying about the equal pay across expat and national. I think it gets at the last question on intersectionality, which I think we have appreciated for sure. And IFC research, indeed. I mean, World Bank research has done much more. We are starting now. We are undertaking research that better accounts for disability, sexual orientation and gender identity, age and ethnicity. It's tougher, as you might have expected me to say, because of data availability. And obviously, these things are very country specific and culture specific. So there's quite a lot of nuance in that kind of research. But we hope to address it, and address it better than we have been.
Yep, over to you too.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, and thank you, Dana, for the question. I think for a long time, I felt a little bit disconnected from the conversation around, do we need more female CEOs or female board members? What difference is that really making for the majority of the women out there? I was part of this chat this morning with the Avpn Asia Gender Network, and in fact, a lot of human trafficking, sexual abuse victims are still women. So the question is more like, how do we really get entrepreneurs and investors to understand these issues and then come up with entrepreneurial solutions for that? And one of the persistent questions that we get when we do fundraising is, how big is the Vietnam market? What scale will it be able to grow? And I think if we can look beyond the 1% or the premium segment, something magical will happen.
Any other takers for those questions? Yeah, I guess. Well, any of the questions. I think whether about, I think, I think we haven't actually really answered yet during challenging times. Yeah.
So the last question there was on how do you ensure there's organizational alignment around these kinds of matters, whether it's gender matters or broader impact / ESG matters. Each firm will have to answer for itself, but at least for our team, we have established as one of our, we use objectives and key results, OKRs, to prioritize what we focus on an annual basis or a quarterly basis at a team level and individual level. Our team level OKRs, there are 6 total, 2 main ones, and within that 3. One of the 6 is around gender, supporting, well, I can't remember the exact wording because we just drafted it, but it's something along the lines of be the most preferred starting point for women, early stage women entrepreneurs in Vietnam. And of course, there are some actionable steps that we want to take within the coming quarter and quarters after that. So by setting that as a very clear OKR, it's one of 6 along the side, get net markups for our portfolio companies, start to liquidate certain companies, et cetera. I think it's very clear how important it is to our team, how important it is that we continue to push on this. That's on alignment internally. And then how do we make sure the top leadership is aligned to continue to push that and enforce that and not say a few quarters from now, drop that out of the OKRs and put something else in its place. And frankly, it's around incentives, implicit incentives around the analysis that we've all shared today about how a more balanced approach to investing can yield better returns, how a more balanced portfolio can yield better risk returns, et cetera. But then also, again, back to the LP side, there are LPs who are looking to invest in funds that are mindful and intentional about this. We have a financial backer for our next fund who has laid out explicit positive incentives if we achieve certain thresholds on percentage of our funding going to women. So yeah, there are implicit and explicit reasons for us to be doing this consistently over the long term.
Thank you for sharing. Might go out for another round of questions, if any. Great, I think there's you at the, yeah, please go ahead.
So thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Selena. So I found an impact venture builder. My dream is next 2 years we found a new fund start from 10 mil. But right now we're supporting every year 100 tech startup per year. We are the 2nd year of venture builder, and we focus on climate and environment. My question is not for specific any speaker here, but anyone relative to can please answer for me and this audience. So we define clearly female in investing practice. It means female C-level from finance firms and female who receive fund that are C-level as well, or at least the leader, and then female user in the fund they receive in the service to improving their life, their leadership, and their educations. So we define clearly, and then we define strategy from the PE and the VC in this room. I know that's very limited because in Vietnam we have around 100 PE and a VC, even a very small one. And from that, politics also very important. That's why we're working not only with investor and founder, entrepreneur, but we're working directly with military and the other higher so they can change in policy, politics, And what is the difference between Vietnam in this term compared with Thai, Sing, and Malaysia? And what difference between US? We have AmCham and AusCham here. So what is different and how they make it happen? Last 5 years, last 10 years. And how many VC and PE here gonna make this, this topic happen next 5-10 years? So what is case studies? What is the strategy and the specific project that impact on entrepreneur or leadership or innovation? Thank you.
Thank you. please. I think this gentleman at the back and then the lady here. Whichever way. They'll both get to ask their questions in this session.
Hi, I'm Naziam from UNICEF Vietnam. I have 2 questions and a comment. First question for Amy. Amy, nice to see you here. You just shared about the study, right, on the gender and investment, but IFC also has the study on childcare and the business case for investment in childcare. Do you see any, the data that, you can connect there? Because we did hear the issue of the responsibility of care and how that could also stop women from climbing up the ladder. And my second question is for the panelists, because I think it's great to have you here thinking about responsible investment and companies to have responsible business practices. But what would it take to expand? And this becomes the norm of investment. That's how investors start to think. And my final comment is, I think unfortunately we still live in a world where in a lot of countries, women don't even have to take their first breath, and they're already judged that this is how she will grow, this is how what she will achieve, or sometimes we're not given opportunity to even take the first breath, right? So I feel that that part we all need to do still a bit more, work with government, work with others, and the whole gender stereotyping, I think we all agree that still exists, how we raise our daughters and sons, like, not just to, I heard a bit there on think like a man, but I think we need to change that to, think in a way you're creative and strategic, not fight like a man, but fight as hard as you can, not run like a man, but run as fast you can. I think we need to start changing those from early on, from childhood. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we'll take the final question.
Hi, thank you. I have a very simple question, and that's for Eddie. Based on your portfolio, do you see a marked difference between the returns you generate from companies founded by women, which have a significant percentage of women who are either founders on the C-level? And if it is, then would you be able to quantify for us what those drivers are, which drives this outperformance, if there is?
Great. Yep, I think we have 4 questions again. Okay, well, I'll let you answer the question, Eddie. But just to recap the questions. So I think the first one was around kind of bringing a comparative perspective. I think from what I understand to the table, what have we seen, say, in the US, Thailand, Singapore, other markets, right? Whether that's in terms of policy changes or investor behavior, right? To kind of highlight this issue. The second one, I think, which was specifically for Amy, was around childcare and the business case for investment in childcare. And the third question was around, how do we really expand, I think, gender lens investing, or I guess other such, topics to really become just good investing, right? And then finally, Eddie, I think the question on returns, you're clear. So who would like to chip in? I think Ali.
I'll chime in on the question about making it more mainstream, because I think when we started planning this event, I am very used to, for AVPN, having to kind of, not really talk about the impact side of things when we have these types of conversations with private equity and venture capital funds. A lot of the times, especially in Asia, these topics are taboo. We're very used to money being made on one side, charity being done on another side, and kind of having that 2-pocket syndrome, as we call it. When I started talking with these guys about the panel and with our partners at Investing in Women, it was really exciting to see that the funds here, who were not impact funds specifically, but private equity, venture capital funds, this was a priority for them. They were already doing it. It was something that they had been integrating. And so I think that the fact that we are marketing this event as a gender lens investing event, and we have the number of people in the room and on the call today, that to me is a very positive signal in that way of this becoming more mainstream, this becoming just good business, not an add-on. So comment on that.
I want to touch on the direct question as well as the question on how do we make sure that this gender lens investing theme continues to spread around the region and the world. Where does it stand today? And I'll do that in reverse order, which is I think the VC and private equity industry is pretty bad around the world in terms of these numbers. It's not just Vietnam. We shouldn't kick ourselves and at the expense of, I think the IFC report shared some of those numbers very clearly. In Silicon Valley, I think it's about 2% of venture funding goes to women-led startups across stages. It's an appalling number. So, and how does that change? Sadly, it doesn't change overnight, but it's a lot of things that have already been talking about, and then the results that come over the longer term. Representation in the investment committee meetings matters. It changes outcomes in terms of the decisions. And then, taking steps to abstract away environmental negative influences in terms of the process. I didn't mention these earlier, but caution about how we as investors even ask questions of potential investees and how that might elicit different responses from different entrepreneurs, whether they're men or women or of other considerations in terms of backgrounds, how we interpret the kinds of responses that we tend to get. All these things that if we continue to work on them over time, it's not going to necessarily yield results in the next few years, but in say 10, 20 years, I believe consistently returns will, let me broaden it, risk return profiles for folks who are more cognizant of these considerations will be better than those who are ignorant of these considerations. Time will tell. I guess you can ask me in 2040 how our funds are doing. But so far, to that answer, how are we doing so far? I hinted at this before that overall, so far across our companies, if we segregate by those who have a woman founder versus those who don't, the average return for those who don't is actually higher. I can't remember how much higher at the moment, and our numbers have to be updated after Q1. So that's a little bit antithetical to this, but what I think is also important to see is the variance in terms of the performance of these companies, which is our companies that have a woman founder have tended to have write-downs or write-offs much less frequently. And you asked why. I would caution to draw any conclusions on a relatively small data set, but I speculate that these companies have tended to focus on getting to break even sooner, have tended to be less risk-taking in terms of some things, which has proven to be very good, especially in a time of COVID. So those are speculations that I have. There could be other factors at play as well.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to chip in?
Oh, yes. Hi, Nasim, and thank you for the question on childcare. So indeed, IFC did a study released last August on the business case for employer-supported childcare. We found actually quite strong returns on investment for some companies to consider actually providing childcare, and certainly for almost any company to be offering family-friendly policies and practices. And I'm certain that access to care and helping balance care work between men and women and balance between work and non-work or paid work and unpaid work is part of what it will be required to get more gender balance within private equity and venture capital funds, and certainly to get it within the portfolio companies. So childcare and family-friendly policies can absolutely be part of the solution here for sure.
Actually, just I think one of the important points, I think, at least for me, on how do we make gender lens investing mainstream really comes to the allocators, right, the LP level. And I think your study had some really interesting results on that, right? I mean, how many LPs are interested in this topic? And well, I'll let you share.
This is indeed one of the interesting findings. We asked the allocators of capital to the funds, how important LPs, how important is gender to you? And 65% said it's very important. We asked the general partners, how important is gender to your LP? Not really. 25% said they ask about it sometimes. So something is missing in the translation between the LPs and the GPs about how important gender might be. And I think the research we're hoping was part of what can change that dynamic and get LPs to maybe be a bit more vocal, to get GPs to listen a little more carefully, perhaps.
Well, with that, I think, oh, is there one burning Question. ooh,
Actually,
wow.
there's
Oh.
one question that came online as
see.
well. So if we could honor our one online question.
Okay, so the question for the audience who cannot see it is, it's from Smita from IMC Worldwide, and she's interested, I think, or it could be he or she, I'm not sure. They could be interested in why female-headed organization is the key gender lens tagging used by Vietnamese funds. If this is true, why not use other criteria such as percentage women in senior management or in the overall workforce, or looking at products or services for women and women in the supply chain. So I think the question is, are we focused more on I guess, who was the CEO or the general partner, or are we looking at kind of other criteria and other types of data as well as we make our decisions? Anyone like to share? I think for us, the short answer is definitely yes. We look at it at all those different levels. Is that kind of the experience for the others on this panel?
Since we're early in the process, all of these matter in the long run. And I think if you do all of these, you will end up analyzing the opportunities better than if you don't. We have not gone down all the way to that list, frankly, out of not having spent the time to learn, to develop personally and to implement it into our process. But it's part of the work that we'll be doing with a partner of ours over the coming couple of years. The first one, why female-head organization, it's the easiest thing to do, a very, very quick check. And it does matter also, it has an impact, but you're right, Smita, you're right that it shouldn't be the only thing that folks look at in the long run.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but please feel free to introduce yourself to the panelists after we have the formal close, if you have more questions. I think, yeah, there are so many great insights today. I won't try and summarize them all, but I think hopefully you are leaving a little more, I think, inspired about what gender lens investing can mean, and also a little clearer about what some of those first steps might be. And I think we've all said many times, it's a journey. It's about long-term organizational change, culture change. That's absolutely the way that we think about it as well. But yes, I think, hopefully we feel that we can start with simple steps, tomorrow. Oh, you've won burning point. Okay. 1 minute.
Sitting here, I think that like a gender lens investing or like the women empowerment leadership, all kind of stuff. It starts from us, each individual here as a woman. Yeah, as a man. No, but it starts from the woman first. I think that we don't need like anyone else like empower us, right? Like you just said, I really love you just said, just like a rethink. Maybe that like we don't need to think as a man, think as a woman, as a woman. And it all starts from the woman. It starts from here, from us. Yeah, thank you.
Very inspired by Ki Yang, and that's why I have to say this. I think in addition to thinking of like government policy when it comes to setting expectations for young girls, I actually think entertainment is a great avenue to go for. We need to bring back the goddess, the priestess, the female heroines, but Asian or Vietnamese or wherever you are, to the children.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it starts early, right? And I think through media, and I think all of these influences which shape us from a very young age. But with that, we really have to stop. So I think I'm handing back to Mary. Thank you so much again to the panelists for your contribution.
So that sounded to me like that was a plug for that new Disney movie, Raya, but I'm not sure. That was incredible. But I would like to now invite Simon Fraser, the Executive Director of AusCham, to give some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Sitting here today, there's a few emotions that I feel. I feel humbled to stand here and or sit here and listen to the stories and also the information shared by the people in this room. Some of what was spoken about today, I feel embarrassed to not know. especially in these days. I feel inspired as well with the information that's been shared that everybody in this room can make a difference to bringing diversity and equality to the workplace. I'm determined and obligated as the Executive Director of AusCham to make a change. And with that, I'd also like to just share that in the time that I've been in Vietnam, for quite a few years now, I have seen these changes within the workforce that I've worked in, mostly big MNCs, and I can see changes that have been made gradually every year. So it's encouraging to know that this is ongoing, and it's encouraging to know that people in this room are still making a change. I'd like to thank, obviously, the number of people who've been involved to get us to this point. The moderator today, Xuan, it was great to actually meet you, because every time that I've seen you, it's always been on a webinar due to the past year. I'd like to thank Julianne Cowley for speaking today as well, the Consul General to Ho Chi Minh City. Also to Amy Luinstra that filled in for Kyle, and we hope he gets better. Jimin Zhang, I was really interested to hear you speak, because you and I seem to be in the same place. There's 80% women at Mekong Capital, and I sit in exactly the same situation. Mind you, there's only 5 people in my staff, but I am the 20% man. It was very inspiring to hear, no matter the size of the business, that there's that share of gender. Also, Tunyo, thank you very much. I'm just looking around for faces. For your experiences, and also knowing exactly what's happened with the brand and how you progressed as well. And Eddie Tai, I think we may have met as well, but thank you very much for your input. Beyond that, I'd like to thank Avpn, who have been sponsored by the Australian government and the Australian government as well. And also to Mary Tonalka for the efforts today, and also for AmCham's input and being able to partner with them for this very special event. I'd like to also add that this is an ongoing conversation that doesn't end today, and that Avpn, with the support of AmCham and AusCham, will be holding another event on Wednesday, the 19th of May. So basically it's gender lens investing in practice again, but the intention of the next event is to be more granular with where we go to next. We've heard from experts today their experiences, but what we'd like to find next is how we get involved and how we can make it happen. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody who's attended today in person, and both those people online, for making this a very successful event, and I thank you for your time.
And with that, I'm going to put in one plug for one upcoming event, which is Ambassador Daniel Crittenbrink is going to be departing soon. We are having a farewell dinner for him next Monday. If you haven't signed up and you're interested, please sign up. And with that, our networking cocktail will begin both in this room and just outside. Thank you all for coming.